Yes, it's true they built the train. Yes, it's true they did fight on top of the train. A few shots. They fight on top of the train. But every time Tom and him are in peril and you see the signals almost hitting them, the signals are full CG. The tunnel is full CG. All those things, which is the real peril, they are full CG. And I'm going to keep mentioning this and going to keep calling out all these articles, all these bullshit YouTubers and bullshit articles of people that don't know what they're talking about, because I know what I'm talking about. And I feel like it's a shame that they never interview experts, they never get real sources. They just do these clickbait articles and never really get the other side of the story. They just are pushing this agenda. And this agenda is really harmful because it develops this idea in the mindset of the moviegoer that it's all practical, CG is bad, and it just doesn't help. Maybe again, I've talked with a lot of people behind the scenes. Maybe it's time for the VFX community also do a strike. And do you imagine that if there was a strike with the visual effects community, nothing would come out? Like, literally nothing would come out. Nothing. This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to the VFX Notes Podcast. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and as always, I'm joined by Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi there, Hugo. How are you?
Hi Ian, how you doing? I'm good. Thank you so much for asking.
I'm good too. Today we are covering Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I thought that was a mouthful, but it's not actually when you say it out loud, Hugo. Not at all.
I'm sure they did huge market research to make sure that worked fine in the end.
We are going to dive into the digital visual effects work in this film, which, of course, from some of the marketing of the film, you would be led to believe there wasn't that many visual effects shots, but there's actually 2,500. Before we jump into that, we really want to make sure we say thank you to our sponsors, to our like and subscribers, and to our Patreon viewers, Hugo, without which we wouldn't be able to do this podcast. So thank you so much to all of them.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone that supports us. We love it, and that's why we do the show. Thank you.
And as always, we're going to start with our own review of the film before we jump into the practical and digital visual effects work. Hugo, what did you make of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1?
Well, I guess my first thing was like, the film is okay. You know, I think the film is okay. I left the cinema thinking, okay. I watched it on IMAX. It was fun. And like most Mission Impossible movies, it's always a lot more hype and you think it's going to be much better, and then it ends up never being as good as you think it's going to be. I think that's the feeling I have. I think the film has good moments, definitely good moments, but it's not a masterpiece. It's not very well constructed. It's too long. Come on, let's stop with this long thing of doing films that take forever. It has too many acts and too many characters and too many things. I feel the film never really reaches the height that it promised. I mean, the film was so hyped. Man, come on. We've been watching behind the scenes of this film for like how many years now? Years and years of watching this damn bike ride. The bike ride. And then the bike ride happens. It's like, it's just flat, you know? So the film is okay. I felt the film was, that's my sentence. The film is okay, not mind-blowing. Not gonna really. I think there were other Mission Impossible films that were better, but I don't know. Maybe it's getting a bit tiring, and maybe it needs a refresh. And I'm curious to see what happens with part two. Not that it became much of a cliffhanger, but it was a bit underwhelming for me. That's my feeling. I didn't thought it was a bad film. I think it's technically well made and it's competent, well acted. There's some good actors on it. And I think Tom Cruise did a good job for especially thinking that he's 61 years old. I think it's impressive, some of the fights and some of the choreographies and some of the stunts, and some of the VFX are a bit hit and miss. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel, a bit underwhelmed.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the film, as we're talking, has made something like $430 million worldwide, but is generally considered to be a disappointment, especially in America.
Yep.
And part of that is the Barbenheimer effect, right? Or whatever they're calling that. The Oppenheimer and Barbie effect, which basically came out a week later than this film. I think this is a really good film, a really fun, go to the cinema and have a great time film. I think it suffers from two things, which is it's a double header or a two-parter, sorry. And so you kind of do leave the film a bit oh, okay, what's going to happen? And it's not actually much of a cliffhanger. That's one of the challenges, right? We kind of know what's going on with this submarine and the entity, and we don't know what it is all about, and we don't know what who some of the baddies are, and that sort of thing. But it's not, oh my god, I need to see part two, and I think that's why people are not watching it 6 times like they might Barbie or Oppenheimer. I think maybe you're right. We've had a lot of mission films, and the past 2, in my opinion, were fantastic. Fallout was great, and had some really darker moments. I didn't feel like this one had those darker moments to sort of to showcase the characters in different ways. I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was super fun. But it just isn't quite... And Hugo is absolutely correct about the hype. The hype comes from these featurettes, which, because the film was made over such a long period, these featurettes have been shown for the past year and a half, and they're often to show the crazy stunts that Tom Cruise is doing. But it doesn't live up to the hype. I absolutely agree with you there, Hugo.
No, and there's these featurettes have 20-something million views. It's insane for a featurette. And in that sense, I think Tom Cruise is doing what Tom Cruise does. He's enjoying himself. He's doing whatever he wants, and he's super powerful. He does, he's the only person that is able to jump 500 skydives just to test this. It's do you really need to do 500 skydives? Probably not, but I'm having fun. And then they boast about the 13,000 jumps of the motorcycles. It's all a bit, I don't know, it feels a bit overindulging. It feels like he's just enjoying himself and no one else. It's almost like it reminds me of The Office. The boss is having a lot of fun, but then no one else is having fun. He's having a lot of fun, but everyone is just filming him, and it's not that good. But he's enjoying it so much. He's smiling and he's taking everyone with him, and I feel like those behind the scenes are a bit like that. But
it's curious though, isn't it? It's an interesting marketing ploy. It clearly gets people into the cinema and talking about it.
Yeah.
And he and the team were able to do a worldwide marketing push before the actors' strike and writers' strike. And, people love going to a red carpet premiere or seeing Cruise on one. But with these particular promos, I do wonder whether there would be this better value seeing that for the first time in the film.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be shown in a trailer. But there's something about watching it 27,000 times as a promo. And then in the film, it actually didn't have a huge impact, that motorcycle jump or the train crash or riding on the train. But for different reasons that we'll talk about. But it was more because we'd seen so much of it.
Yeah.
I wonder whether if you leave these huge sequences to the audience to enjoy for the first time, whether they would then start talking about them as word of mouth things. Well, what do you think about that, Hugo?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I feel like this was over promoted. That's how I feel, and I think it kind of paying the price. I feel like the film is not grabbing people because I think people are a bit over it, and it's been so long that we've been watching these things, and I don't know, I have a feeling that people think, look at, people only have limited time. And obviously they think, oh, I'm going to go and see Barbie with the kids, and then I'm going to see Oppenheimer for a serious movie. And Mission Impossible, I watched it on Blu-ray. And I'm sure Mission Impossible paid that price by being the third wheel on this summer thing. And I feel it was overhyped, and people are probably just thinking, oh, we'll just watch it on Sky, watch it on streaming. And it's probably going to be a success there, and to be honest, 400 and something million is not a failure. It's a failure because they say it's they say it's a failure, but of course it's not a failure. Come on, if there wasn't Barbie around, there would have been the biggest film of the last few weeks.
Yeah,
would have been bigger than Oppenheimer, been bigger than the other ones. It's just that Barbie is there. It's already past Indiana Jones, so it's already past The Flash. It's bigger than all those films, but It's funny, isn't it? Because so much hype about the bike and the car chases because they were all real, and then the train. But for me, when I watched the movie, the most interesting thing of the movie for me was this plot, which wasn't really very developed. This AI entity, I thought it was a very cool idea, very well written, And I thought this was the cool thing about the film. This AI entity can control everything, can change like security camera footage in real time. This is really scary, and this is exactly what it's kind of happening right now with AI, and we are all scared about that. I think it's very poignant, and it's very on the moment, that story, and it's a shame because that's the best part of the film, and I don't feel like they've developed that part much. I feel like the plot wasn't.
Yes.
Other Mission Impossibles had plots more developed, and I feel like they kind of forgot the plot and just focused on the action, and which is a bit of a shame. Mission Impossible was always supposed to be brainy. You know what I mean? It's like the difference. And I'm sure everyone is going to hate me by saying this, but it's the difference of Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars is like a war movie. Star Trek is like a philosophical thing going on space. It's the same thing with Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible is like this brainy thing with puzzles, and people would wear masks, and the TV show was like that as well. Even the earlier films were like that. They weren't all about the action. It was never like that. It was more about the plots and the espionage and the backstabbing. It was about the political intrigue. And it kind of was forgotten on this film, which is a bit of a shame, I think. I think that's why it's a bit lukewarm for me, at least.
Yeah. There's a fantastic sequence when they're at, some US government security installation going fully analog in front of them. And all these important people are in this room, and Ethan Hunt's managed to infiltrate it. Yeah. That is a tense, fantastic scene, of course, because it also reunites him with his previous adversary. And that sets up a really great dynamic about the plot in terms of all these countries will want to have the entity, right? Because then they can control the world. And I would totally agree with you that tense sequence seemed to set up something really cool and then wasn't really followed through.
Yeah.
May well be followed through in a bigger way in part 2.
Maybe.
But in general, the plot kind of, you didn't care as much about the AI stuff, yet that is really what everyone is talking about at the moment in the real world.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if that was even more explored here.
And I think in a way I need to shout out the director, because he's a wonderful writer. He's a good director, but he hasn't directed a lot. Of course, he's directed a few films, but he's very good writer, and he has a lot of really good stories behind him. In a way, even going back to one of his first films, which he wrote, which was The Usual Suspects, which is one of my favorite films from the 90s, and he's an excellent writer, and you can clearly see that Christopher McQuarrie brought in all this plot device, and that sequence is so much him. With him coming in with Tom Cruise comes in with that controller, and then the thing explodes with the gas inside the room. The whole thing is like Mission Impossible all over. It's
Love
just like
that.
so
Loved
cool.
it so much.
Best sequence of the film. I would swap all of those crazy stunts and all those things by stuff like that. And I felt that they've missed a beat there. But I really need to shout out, because I think Christopher McQuarrie is a great writer, and he has some really good scripts with him.
Yeah. He's also been traditionally really good at sharing tips and tricks on social media. Mostly Twitter, I think, but also Instagram.
Yeah.
And, that's a nice giving back to the community thing that I've really enjoyed. And, he's super honest. And actually, one of the things he's most honest about is, although he's directing these huge franchise films, he doesn't have much original content that he has actually written getting made, or directing, being able to direct. So I like his honesty there. And I think, we'll come to this, but I think the only thing he sometimes isn't, it's not saying dishonest. The only thing he's doing, which is so common right now, is we filmed it all practically. I know we're going to come to that, Hugo.
No,
but generally love McHugh.
No, he writes really well. I love Edge of Tomorrow. I think it's an excellent script, and I love Top Gun, of course. We've talked so much about Top Gun last year, and Usual Suspects, and of course these Mission Impossible movies, which he was also the writer of Fallout and also Rogue Nation. He's also the director of those. But I feel like he's an excellent writer, and he really, maybe it gets a bit I don't know, man. I don't know what the dynamic is between him and Tom Cruise, but I feel like Tom Cruise must be quite powerful on his side, and I'm sure like he has a lot of say of what is getting done and how many stunts is done in films. I'm sure he has that kind of power, but yeah. Anyway, like I think the film, I think people should go and watch it, but I feel like the film, I'm also waiting for part 2. I'm not sure when it comes out. I think it's going to be a while until part 2 comes out. But I'm also looking forward to see how this wraps up. Maybe it will become an excellent story, and it gets wrapped up, and maybe they got rid of all the stunts now, and they're now going to focus on something else,
Well, that's an interesting point just to make really quickly. In a single Mission Impossible film, because it's a spy thriller, there's twists and turns.
Yeah.
So usually one character who you think is good tends to be bad, and vice versa. I think that's the trouble here with the double header.
Yeah.
Two-parter. It's not a double header. I don't know why I keep saying that. Two-parter. In that if there is a character who's actually a bit more mysterious than we're meant to know, we won't know until the second film.
Yeah.
And so if they hinted at it, maybe that would have been the cliffhanger I'm after.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like they hinted at it at all. For example, the character played by the amazing Hayley Atwell, who I think is brilliant in this, especially in terms of comedy and also action. You sort of are not sure if she's a naive thief or whether maybe there's something more at play with her. I hope there is.
Yeah.
But in one film, we'd get that all resolved. In 2 films, we have to wait. Obviously.
Yeah, there must be more than that, because you notice like there's a part of the film that she starts really kicking ass and actually punching people and actually having knowledge of fighting, quite good knowledge, and so it must be something there. She might be either a CIA operative or an ex-MI6 or whatever, or maybe she's part of the thing. No, I know what you mean. That's the thing. Like the cast is great. The cast is fantastic. I really like how all of them came together, and it's a shame that we didn't see much of Vig Rhames. Like he kind of disappeared halfway through the movie. Maybe he comes back on the next movie, but he wasn't very much part of this movie. He was always like sitting on a desktop on a computer, and then just like and then just vanished halfway through the film. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But yeah, Simon Pegg was nice. He's not as much comic relief as he usually is, but it was nice to see him again. But yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. But you see, that's the first part of the film. The first half, which is that wonderful part of them infiltrating the headquarters, and then the airport sequence, which is where you still see Simon Pegg and you still see Vig Rhames, and you see all that thing with the digital cameras and all of the swapping of the faces. That's all really cool. It's after the film kind of loses momentum. The whole skydiving and the train and all that part is just a bit too much and a bit off, but we've said it already enough.
I think it's an interesting film that will be really interesting to watch as two films together.
Yeah.
And there might be clues that were placed in the first film.
Yeah.
That will be fun to see how that, manifests itself in the second. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Hugo, let's turn to the big set pieces.
Yeah.
Because that's really what this film is all about. And also where the film doesn't work, in my opinion, is basically mapped out as big set pieces without the awesome plot that missions usually have. I guess the first set piece to talk about is the Venice chase.
Yeah.
Hang on, let's just stop here. Is that right? That's probably right.
But are you talking about the Venice night chase, or are you talking about the car chase?
Well, the car chase.
Oh, the car chase, I'm not sure. It is it Venice as well? I think it's Rome, or is it Venice? I need to go check.
That's good.
Because the Venice one is during the night, and I think, I'm going to go and check.
It must be Rome, because it's in the...
Maybe it's not. I don't know. Like maybe they're already in Venice, and it's both of them in Venice. Let me just double check.
Where's the Spanish Steps?
The what?
Where are the Spanish Steps?
God. You see, we're so well prepared. That's. I don't have notes. You see, that's why.
They're in Rome. They're in Rome.
Is it Rome? Okay. It kind of
yeah.
Rome. Yeah. They destroyed.
You've got to put this in. You've got to put this in.
So it's okay. So Rome twice in a year then, because Rome was also damaged on Fast 5, Fast 10.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, let's talk about that.
I'm looking at the Paramount Pictures thing. Yeah, you're right. Rome car chase. Jam. You see? Oh my God. Yeah, I'll leave it in. It's quite funny. I'll leave it in for sure.
Okay, here we go. Hugo, I think the Rome car chase, where basically Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell are, chained together and driving this yellow tiny car.
It's a Fiat, Fiat 500.
Fiat is the big first set piece that we'll talk about. And actually, I really liked it. It was the right comedy beats, especially with their dynamic. And, had Rome, which looked beautiful. Funnily enough, we had another big film featuring Rome already this year with Fast X.
Yeah, we did. Right. You're right. Hey, I didn't do this on purpose, actually. You're right. Destroying Rome twice in 1 year. You're right. Not as much as Fast 10, of course.
What did you think of that sequence?
No, you're right. It's quite funny. It's like a really big comedy relief. Sometimes the jokes land, sometimes they don't. But it's a great way of introducing those two characters and to showcase how they don't know each other and they have to work together. And the little Fiat 500, the electric, because it's electric, you can kind of hear that it's an electric version of that car, is really funny. Now, I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was funny. But I was watching this on IMAX. And by the way, the film pretends to be on IMAX. It's not on IMAX. You can clearly see that it's not on IMAX because at the end as well, the credits say formatted for IMAX, not shot on IMAX. And you can kind of see it when you're watching it on IMAX. You notice that there is so much CG on these shots. Oh my God, there's so much CG. And because you notice that, like the little subtle inconsistencies on the motion blur, the little subtle inconsistencies on the grain, the little things that the car is doing that is not practically impossible for the car to do, like the little jumps, there's certain things. And then, of course, it's intercut with real shots of the car doing things. So it's very well made, very well constructed, and you can kind of, on a whole, you can kind of feel that the film is all real, but it's actually not. And I feel like that was the moment that I started, I watched that behind the scenes, that amazing behind the scenes where they keep saying the sentence, it was all shot practically, it was all shot practically. They keep saying that over and over and over on the behind the scenes. And it's a shame that we are still on this world where we have to like not. It's not lying. They're not lying. They're just. I'm sure they think it was all shot.
Well,
I'm sure
it was shot practically.
Yeah, it was.
Because
but it
how else are
wasn't.
you going to shoot it?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's a bit misinformed, and it's kind of like borderline pretending that it's all practical. And I know it works really well with the audience. We've had this discussion with Fast 9. It was exactly the same thing with Fast 9. They all said it was all shot, and they shot everything, and then we ended up watching the breakdowns years later. I'm just like a bit fed up of this, and the sequence is nice and it's interesting, but why can't we just like have a normal conversation saying practical effect joined with VFX and it made it all better? Why can't we just have an honest conversation about this? I don't really understand why, because we used to in the 90s and 2000s, we used to like be very clear to say that it was a combination of both. You know, we've discussed this on The Perfect Storm, for example, where all the featurettes talk about being real, a practical both, but also with CG, and we see both of sides thing working together, and all of it really working really well. I don't really understand why we can't do the same with shots like this, but you know.
Yeah, it's part of definitely a larger issue, which seems to be about marketing. Yeah. It seems to be about tell everyone that it was real stunts and real actors in peril, and then Atwell and Cruise get to go on talk shows and talk about how that was for them. I will counter this slightly, Hugo, which is, of all the franchises and big films, it's probably Mission that tries to do as much practical as possible. Whenever a director says that, or even a visual effects supervisor says that, they are shooting as much as possible. And actually, I think what's really happened, like if I really analyze it, production companies have got so good at filming car chases today, and we're talking Fast and Furious and Mission and other big Marvel films as well. There's an amazing car chase in Black Widow, for example. Yeah. They've got so good at filming the elements for these car chases. And the elements are go to a city, block off some streets, film it with stunt drivers and also the actors, maybe. Yeah. But sometimes not. In the case of Fast and Furious, they don't shoot with the actors. They shoot the actors on blue screen. Yeah. There's a level of that here, but you know, they do film with the actors. They film with pod cars where they have the stunt drivers on top. But you're absolutely right. By the way, this sequence, the visual effects for it were done by ILM. And they are absolutely adding in CG cars and environments. And an array car goes and shoots the environment, you know. And I just think, I really mean that. They have got so good at knowing what elements to film to put these things together, that they do actually work really well as dynamic car chases. But we're getting into ridiculous territory when people say it was all filmed for real, because it's just not true.
I know. And at least Mission Impossible credited most of the people, you know. If you look at the credits, there are 600 people credited. There should have been 773, but, you know, I'm going to forgive them that they've missed 100 and something people. But I feel like there are 773 people credited on this movie. 100 and something are uncredited, but there are 700.
You're talking about the list in IMDb, which is unreliable, to be frank.
I know. But the list on the film, I didn't count it because it was going too fast, but it was huge. Okay, so on the film itself, it was a huge list. And to be frank, like Mission Impossible's usually credit the people, like usually you see a quite long credit list. And I think that has to do with the production company, Paramount, and also like the way that Tom Cruise always wants to credit everyone. And I feel like their credit lists are usually huge. And I'm just like saying this, I'm mentioning this number, and I'm sure it's not reliable, but maybe it's give or take. 500, 600, 700, it's going to be give or take. There's so many companies involved and so much CG involved that it is going to be quite a huge number of people. And to be frank, if you look at all of the credits on the entire film, it is the largest team on the film, by far. Larger than the stunts, larger than the catering, larger than the acting, larger than the film crew. It is the majority of the crew is the VFX team. And yeah, I can't understand why we can't be a bit more. I don't mind them doing these behind the scenes and showing them. They're amazing. They're really cool to see how they shot it for real, how they did it. But I just wish that there was another behind the scene, a third one showing, and now we're going to show you the visual effects of it. And I just feel like this entire thing of these bloated sentences saying, we shot it all for real, it is just marketing bullshit. People need to know this. I'm going to keep drumming this drum all the way on Twitter every time I can, because I'm just so tired of this. And I am so tired, and I'm not even saying Mission Impossible is the worst one. Mission Impossible tends to have breakdowns later on. They tend to release some stuff. It's not like Tenet or like Dunkirk, which didn't show anything. It's not like that. It's a film that actually they end up showing things later on, and a bit later, of course, like much later. But I do feel that they in the past showed not everything, of course, but they showed at least more than some other films do. So.
Yes, and maybe what it sometimes ends up resulting in, at least for people in the know, which is hopefully us, Hugo, but also the visual effects community, is a slightly absurd thing moving to the motorcycle jump, where clearly Tom Cruise performed this stunt of going off a ramp on a motorcycle with a parachute, so that he could get to the plot point of jumping onto the moving train. And yes, that absolutely is a physical stunt where they built the ramp and shot it with amazing helicopter and drone work. But anyone who watched the featurette and then saw the trailer shot recognized that the ramp was replaced with a cliffside mountain, and also the environment was inserted.
Yeah.
And I sound stupid saying it, because it's obvious, that's the visual effects work that had to be done. It wasn't like they were never going to do that CG visual effects work. But it becomes a bit weird to harp on the practical side of that when there's clearly a huge digital component to it. I think that's your point a little bit as well.
It is, yeah.
Let's not only talk about one thing.
Yeah.
Now,
because I'm going to give him that. He did jump. He did 6 takes of that thing. And in fact, he did hundreds of tests before. It was really jumped. And he is there. He's there together with the whole full CG shot. It's him on the bike on the middle. So there's 10% of the shot, which is real. Maybe 10%. That's fine. But let's just be honest and talk about the whole thing. That's kind of what I'm getting into. Yeah. And it's still very impressive that he did it. Man, it's quite a courageous thing to do, to be honest. And I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And it's spectacular.
Yeah.
Because I have to be honest, Hugo, when that jump was showcased about a year before the film came out, I thought maybe this is obscene. They have gone... IMF has built that ramp for Tom Cruise to,
for the film,
and I actually thought, that's actually kind of cool. Yeah. If that's what had to happen. But no, of course, it's about jumping off the mountain. Of course it is.
Man, they should hire you. That was such a better idea.
I know.
That
clearly.
Come on.
Clearly I should be writing these films.
Man, but that is such a cool idea, because it could have happened. We've seen different weird things happen on the IMF films. Yeah.
The reason I thought that was because they chose such a crazy location to do it, and then replaced it all anyway. Replaced at least the foreground mountain. Can't remember exactly if the background stuff is replaced.
They cleaned up the background. The background is a bit cleaned up, so you don't have the cities and there was little towns and villages. They took all that out, but there is most of the cliff is there.
Yeah. Anyway, moving it just creates an absurdity when clearly it's a visual effects shot. That's all. That's what I think didn't quite work with that shot. And also what didn't quite work, and I hate to say this, in the film, that is not the spectacular jump that maybe the featurette had led me to believe. And I wonder whether there's 2 reasons in my view that it is like that. It's just because it goes by quickly.
Yeah.
That's just one reason. And also, it's on a huge cinema screen. So he's kind of tiny, a dot, in the frame. On the featurettes, of course, the B-roll cameras are always focusing in on Tom.
Yeah, of course.
And so you're almost more engaged in Tom in the featurettes, right? In the film, it wasn't as engaging of Ethan. Do you know what I mean?
And it's funny that you're saying that, because the featurette is actually quite nice. You see how they had the paragliders with the cameras attached to them, and we thought, oh my god, they're gonna get all this amazing footage because they have the guys there with the cameras, and they have all these drones as well. They're so scared the drone might hit him, and then you have the helicopter as well. You have all sorts of things filming, and then they picked one shot for the film, and it's a great example of how a featurette was almost bigger than the film and better than the film. That featurette alone is a much better shot and a much cooler thing. To see the amount of development, they had to do computer simulations to see the jumps. They had to they built a replica ramp on the UK to test this and to see the simulations. And then they jumped 500 times, and then he did motocrossing for months and months, training with all the training around this and all the development. That is a really, really impressive thing. And that's almost like a documentary. I think the behind the scenes is like 10 minutes long. It's a quite big documentary. I don't know what happened. Maybe, you never know. We never know about these films. Maybe it was supposed to be more featured on the film. Maybe it was supposed to be different. The film had, it's been on development for a long time. I don't know. There's rumors that there wasn't a complete synchronization between Tom, the writers, and Paramount and what they wanted. And I've heard behind the scenes that there were some issues with the script. They wanted to make last minute changes. Maybe it was supposed to be more featured. Maybe it was supposed to be bigger than it was, because the behind the scenes came out a year and a half ago. I mean, the film wasn't even ready by then. Maybe it was the ramp, like you said.
It was a COVID film, so you can understand the craziness of.
But I mean, the filming, the finishing of the shots, and also the final editing wasn't done by then. I'm assuming. But I feel like it's definitely underwhelming completely. I watched it and I was like, oh, is it? Can I go back? I want to watch it again.
Which is interesting of itself.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, if it does just go by as a shot in the film, that's fine. That's almost should be treated like an invisible visual effects shot.
Yeah.
But because it's built up as a huge thing in the featurettes, you can't. At least I did.
Yeah.
I felt like there should have been I don't necessarily think there should have been more made of it. I just felt like more was going to be made of it. That's all.
Yeah. No, I know. And well, anyway, I feel like it's, talking about the VFX though, no disrespect to everyone, but I kind of felt that it looked a bit weird. There was something off on that shot. And I think it has to do with the fact that, I don't know, he's going through this rift, he's going to this cliff on a motorbike. It should have shaken more, and the cliff itself looked a bit too CG. I don't know, there's something off on that shot. And it could be one thing. I actually think it's nothing to do with the CG. I think the CG is perfect. I feel that it's because I've watched it so many times with the ramp that I was just waiting to see the ramp. And then I didn't saw the ramp, and then I saw a cliff, and I was like, oh, what is that? So I think it's like that. You saw it time and time and time and time again with the ramp. And I think choosing to put a greenery riff didn't help. Didn't help because you kind of oh, that was not what I watched. Your brain just felt there was something off there. And I think that's what happened there,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is the reason. Now, here's where it redeemed itself. The moment of him crashing into the train,
oh my god,
was super cool and hilarious.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid. He hits exactly the bad guy. Oh my god, he's so stupid. Talk about the whole train sequence is also such an underwhelming bullshit. Oh my god.
All right, I think that moment worked okay. That's a digi-double takeover again by ILM for that crash moment into the train. And Hugo, just to be clear, the ILM did that whole train sequence, which involved the Orient Express going through the mountainside and ultimately going over into a ravine. Again, Hugo, this train sequence is yet another thing, all the way from the fight
Yeah.
on the train to the actual locomotive going over into the ravine, where there's a lot of featurettes about the practical
Oh, yeah.
train they built
Yeah. And it did.
and the practical stunt fighting.
Yeah. And it was
Now-
built. Was
Yeah.
really built. It's really impressive. Yeah.
All I want to say about it too is that it is impressive that they built it, and it is the basis of all this work.
Yeah.
But once again, they're not really acknowledging the fact that pretty much every train shot is a digital train, because, you know, that had to have many more carriages, had to have the environment, had to sometimes place actors on top of it for more peril and danger. And that work is done by ILM. And I'm not saying we want featurettes about the visual effects before the film's even out, because sometimes that can be spoilery.
But after. After.
Yeah. I'm saying just be careful, really, I'm saying, to film companies to overly promote this as we did it all for real, because you inevitably get the YouTuber, the reporter, the tweeter who just takes that and says, wow, no CGI, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it
You're
just
talking
isn't
about
true.
the Guardian with Barbie's last thing. I know. That's the danger that you get, like people that don't know what they're talking about, have no clue how this is done, and then they post about Barbie doing films like the 1910s. It's just ridiculous. And I completely agree with you. I wish every year we are, both of us are judges on the Visual Effects Society, and we always see all these breakdowns that never come to life. There's so many breakdowns and so many behind the scenes that never get public, never show up, never are posted on YouTube. Sometimes some of them are, sometimes pieces of them are, but they're never really shown. And I wish they were all public, and I feel like they would have really changed the way and the dynamic of how these journalists look at it, because they can research and they could check these clips. That is the shame that happens here. And yes, it's true they built the train. Yes, it's true they did fight on top of the train. A few shots they fight on top of the train, the easiest ones. But every time Tom and him are in peril and you see the signals almost hitting them, the signals are full CG. The tunnel is full CG. All those things, which is the real peril, they are full CG. You can kind of see that sometimes it is a composite, because you see the kind of like weird light wrapping going on the edges, and a little bit of blurry edges and a little bit of off. It's just so clear to me as a trained eye that some of these shots are not real and not shot on top of the train. Or even if they were shot on top of the train, I am certain the train was going much slower and the background was not that they showed. Because yes, you could go at like 20 kilometers per hour and still do the same stunt and then make it look like it's 200 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I really have a problem with. And I know that in September or October, when we get the Visual Effects Society breakdowns, we're going to see all these beautiful breakdowns on all these behind the scenes and making offs, and they will never see light of day. And I get really frustrated by that. I really do. And I agree with you. I don't want to see them before the film. I want to see them after. I want to see them, 3-4 weeks after it comes out. And I wish that was the world that we used to live, because that used to happen. And I'm going to keep mentioning this and gonna keep calling out all these articles, all these bullshit YouTubers and bullshit articles of people that don't know what they're talking about, because I know what I'm talking about. And I feel like it's a shame that they never interview experts, they never get real sources. They just do these clickbait articles and never really get the other side of the story. They just are pushing this agenda, and this agenda is really harmful because it develops this idea in the mindset of the moviegoer that it's all practical, CG is bad, and it just doesn't help the whole thing. It doesn't help the way that we are treated, doesn't help the way that the visual effects companies are brought down, doesn't help the way the visual effects companies are pushed for changes and the race to the bottom with budgets. It really does not help. And maybe again, I've talked with a lot of people behind the scenes. Maybe it's time for the VFX community also do a strike, and Do you imagine that if there was a strike with the visual effects community, nothing would come out? Like, literally nothing would come out. Nothing. No film would come out, except some independent movie that has nothing, no VFX. It's just like, I just feel that this is a shame. And the studios don't help. The studios go along with it because it helps them to put bums on seats. And it's a shame the way they treat these companies and they treat the artists in general. But you know me, I'm always like...
Well, I of course agree with you about many of those things, and the unfortunate thing about a VFX strike is it's almost an impossibility on a global scale.
I know.
And that's one of the challenges. Yeah. Just to talk a little bit about the train sequence.
Go for it.
I thought what worked well was the bridge explosion. They didn't do that practically. That's a simulation by ILM. When the the engine goes off the edge, I thought it looked fine, and that's not a comment on the visual effects, because clearly they threw this locomotive prop off the edge of a ravine in England. What it reminded me of was the motorcycle shot, which is also goes by in an instant and doesn't feel as spectacular. I mean, maybe that's the point. The truth is, if a locomotive goes off into a ravine, even if it hits a river, in a 1990s action film, it would explode, right? And would be crazy. The point is, it goes into the ravine, or the river, and that's it.
And that's
so maybe that's the point of it.
Yeah.
What I did like, though, was the teetering carriages.
Yeah.
And Ethan and Hayley Atwell's character struggling to get up those carriages. It felt a bit like a Jurassic World sequence.
Yeah.
But I thought it worked well. It's clearly a mix of the real actors in sets on gimbals and some great ILM CG for interiors and exteriors. The only thing that didn't work was the physics of it all, right? We shouldn't give a crap about that. But at some point they're jumping weirdly and very, very physically, and I think I've given up caring about physics a long time ago, covering visual effects. But Hugo, that was a bit more of a dynamic part of the sequence, right?
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because that part doesn't show up on the behind the scenes because they didn't shot it for real. But watching the behind the scenes kind of gives you an idea that it was shot for real, because because they keep saying it was real. And then the actress, you have this quote from the actress saying, "It was so wonderful to be there with Tom, and we were hanging on the ledges and this and that." So it gives you an idea that it was all shot for real, but then we never see really where they shot it.
Well, it was shot on a set in probably Longcross Studios. There's a classic. We should have an episode, a whole episode.
You're being too nice. You're being so nice about this. Like it's not. They're literally lying about it on the behind the scenes.
Do you think? I know. Oh my God, here we are.
You're being too nice to them. Like,
do you think sometimes it's not? They're not being that clever with their words, but audiences are okay if it's shot in a set. That is what films are made on sets, right? Like,
yeah.
And when actors say they shot it for real, they actually mean on a set. In the CG VFX world, sometimes we get a bit defensive that them saying shot for real means, they should have gone and shot that in Norway, on a teetering edge of a ravine. Well, I'd never think that. But I think that is what actors often and directors often say. This is the whole, we shot it practically. Well, of course you shot it practically, but I'm trying to make that small nuance, Hugo.
I'm gonna give you a different perspective on this. No. You saw what happened when we did Uncharted, okay? And so Sony, being a company that does video games and they know how CG works, Sony released behind the scenes of him jumping through all those crates with robots' arms and crates, and he was jumping in a real set in the daytime outside. Yes. And guess what? It was intercut. It was intercut between CG shots, and they never pretended the CG shots didn't exist. They clearly showed the CG. They clearly showed the behind the scenes. They clearly showed the real shoot and the breakdown. And they never said, yeah, Tom was really jumping on the crates on the middle of an airplane. They never said this. That was a proper made behind the scenes clip. That's what I meant. That's what I mean. There is a way of doing it correctly and doing it in a way that it credits everyone. It credits the people that did the gimbals. It credits the people that did the stunts. And guess what? It credits the amazing work DNEG did on that sequence as well. So that's what I meant. And I'm not getting rant. I'm not doing a rant for you. I'm doing a rant for the studios. Like, I feel like that is disingenuous. That behind the scenes of the train carriage is a bunch of bullshit. That's how I would say it. Like, and I feel like if we don't call this off, like, it will never change. And the Sony Uncharted thing is a great example of how to do it correctly. And this was not the way to do it correctly. But, you know, I'm always going to rant about this. But the going back to what you said, yes, it is a great sequence. It's very tense. It kind of goes back to what the beginning of the film had. I think it's actually the most interesting part of that entire part of the entire train sequence. That part of them hanging on the ledge is the most tense part, the most well-made part, and the best part. And then it has the
funniest, right?
The funniest.
Like,
and then
the oil fire from the kitchen stuff. Like, it's just like I can see in McHugh's and Cruise's heads, or whatever they use to plan out these scenes. I can totally see what they're doing. I can totally see how that's like that's the thing they love to do. And as an audience, we're giggling, we're into it. It totally works.
Yeah.
It's a pity that some of the other scenes are a bit lax, right? I don't just mean because other scenes are more character moments. You know, like there is a scene of Tom Cruise and Rebecca Ferguson's character on the rooftops of Venice, maybe, or Rome, or somewhere. I'm not sure.
It's Venice.
And I'm going to just say it, Hugo. It's only in the film because they had this amazing backdrop. I know there's a great dynamic between those two characters. I actually love Rebecca Ferguson in these films. Yeah. But I could not help watch that and think they are only filming this because they've been allowed to film up there with these ridiculous, you know, steeples and whatever. Anyway, sorry. So...
No, but I absolutely agree with you. And also, like, there's like this huge character development of that, the villain, I can't remember her name, but the villain that has the sword, she then helps them at the end and helps
Vanessa Kirby's character.
No, not that, the other villain, the assistant to the main villain. She has a sword.
Yes, Pom Clementif.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She kind of helps them at the end, and she kind of saves the day on the carriage at the end. That's a nice part to the character, and then she kind of like just stays on the corner and then dies and everything. And I feel like that's a really, again, like that. It's kind of like, again, similar to the beginning where those shots really worked. And you're right, the chase on the train is wonderful with the kitchen and everything, and they're like just running around. It's the best part of it's one of the best parts of the film. It's so much better than the outside fight or him jumping on. It's so much. I wish they just focused on those really great quirky moments, because the action I guess like at the end of the day, when we are now talking about all of this, it's just really the big set pieces that really were underwhelming. And I'm not sure if they were because we saw so much of them, or if they were really underwhelming. Maybe they were. Maybe if we didn't see any behind the scenes, probably they would have just passed by and we're like, okay, that's fine. I
will say this as a sort of final thing. Compare it to the very early promo for the film, the Mission Impossible film, where Tom Cruise is hanging onto the side of a Globemaster or a big military plane. Now, we saw that a lot, that promo, and we were like, oh my God, did he really do that? In the film, it lasts quite a long time.
It's a fantastic shot.
Yeah. It's a takeoff sequence, right? And
it's like a minute.
Never quite sure how he gets in that door. But anyway, there is something just as spectacular about that scene as the featurette was, because it's actually lasts for a long time. I almost feel the particular ones we've talked about today, the reason they don't have the impact is that they're 3-second shots, if that.
Yeah, they're too short.
If that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not me saying to the director, oh, you should have designed 10-second shots or something. You know, it's just that it just doesn't have that visceral impact because it's not very long.
Yeah.
So.
And I completely agree with you. And I guess that's the thing. We've been slacking about the film, and we're talking a little bit about especially me. I've been ranting quite a lot, but I'm more ranting about the thing in general than the film itself. I think the film is okay. I think people should go and see it. And it's a bit of a shame that the film came out when it came out. I feel like I feel like it's a bit of shame that studios don't synchronize a bit better, because doing this fighting of 3 films in the same weeks it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help any of the films. I think they could have scattered them a bit more through the summer, and they didn't need to come out all at the same time. It kind of hinders all of them, you know.
It's been an interesting post-COVID summer, because there were probably some other big films that people thought were going to do ballistic numbers.
Yeah.
Maybe and they've done huge numbers. I can't believe sometimes we say this, but like Fast X, probably we thought was going to be $1 billion film. Maybe even Little Mermaid, we thought was going to be $1 billion film.
Yeah.
And Elemental was not meant to do very well, and it's actually done really well.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
For example.
It's been a very strange summer for sure.
But maybe no one could have judged what was happening with Barbie and Oppenheimer. But I'm not even sure that really is the reason, because it came out the week before and it's still out, you know, while we're talking, as in people could still go and see Mission if it was a word-of-mouth movie, and it just hasn't become a word-of-mouth movie.
No,
so,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it has, no.
By the way, I just want to make sure we've talked a bit about ILM's work. I'm not super familiar with what everyone else did. The overall VFX soup, Alex Vutke, has done a great job here. Other companies involved include Rodeo, Blue Bolt, SDFX, Yanix, Bellow FX, Lola, Alchemy X, One of Us, Cheap Shot, Atomic Arts, Untold Studios, Blind, and Territory. And there's probably a few more that I didn't mention there. I only wanted to shout out some of those names that I see on the credits, because it's one of those films that has more than 2,000 shots.
Yeah.
Yet, and as we've already talked about, practical.
773 people. 773 people. I'm going to keep saying this. I'm going to tweet about it when we launch this podcast. It's almost 1,000 people. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. But yeah, 2,000 shots. Yeah, I know what you mean. But you know, hopefully some breakdowns come out. They haven't come out yet, but hopefully they do. And hopefully you do some nice articles about it, and we get to see some of the behind the scenes on the film. I wish we could see that at least.
A tiny little anecdote about that. I've covered pretty much every Mission Impossible film, including going back to covering the first one, which had awesome visual effects by ILM and CFC and a few other companies back then. But in recent times, I've still been able to cover the films, but often no visual effects breakdowns come out when the film is out. And in fact, one Mission Impossible film, CineFex was so upset with Paramount that they didn't release any VFX stills, not just befores and afters, that they still ran their article but refused to post any images in the article. I can't remember which Mission film it was, but I thought that was a nice little protest. But you know, I've had the good fortune of being able to talk to places like DNEG and ILM about their work on previous films. And so I'm sure we'll be able to do it this time. I do have an article coming from ILM, but I would love to talk to more of the companies. But yeah, as you can tell, Hugo and I are really shouting to the rooftops, from the rooftops, about the visual effects work. By the way, we love the special effects work and practical effects work. Oh my God. But we just want to acknowledge
but this is not the Special Effects Notes Podcast. It's the VFX Notes Podcast. No, we did love it, of course, but I'm not a specialist on that at all. So I don't think I could talk much about that.
Yeah. Well, Hugo, it's been fun. I really hear your passion there, and I'm equally passionate about it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And again, thanks to our sponsors, Patreon subscribers, and people who like and subscribe us on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Hugo, so much.
This podcast will self-destruct in 20 seconds.
If there's not a fuse going along the bottom, the lower third at the moment, I'm quitting this podcast.
It's gonna be there. Don't worry.
Bye.
Bye.